So you're looking to buy a domain name, but you're not too sure where to start. In this session, we're going to learn a little bit about how to purchase domain names. So the difference between hosting and domain names, that's typically one of the biggest confusion if you're new to this arena. We'll look at how and where to buy a domain name, and then look at some of the different costs associated to buying a domain, as well as some of the hidden costs and also maybe some extra costs that sometimes is bestowed upon you, and you're not too sure whether you need it or not. Now, sometimes you can make a mistake because you don't understand the idea of hosting and domain names. So I'll take you through the idea of domain transfers. If you have made a mistake with buying a domain and you're not too sure how to utilize that to match it up or to connect that to your hosting package. So we'll talk a little bit about that. That's a little bit more technical. And then also talk a little bit about DNS at the end. Again, this is just going to be an introduction to DNS, what it is, to give you an idea of how your domain works, and potentially that would give you some underpinning knowledge to help support you manage your domain name. Okay, so let's talk about the first topic, which is website hosting and website domain names. So I'm making the assumption that you're not too sure what website hosting is and domain names, because you're looking for a domain name, so probably likelihood is that you're also looking for web hosting. Right, so a domain name then is just a name. So google.com, bbc.com, bbc.co.uk. These are just domain names. So this generally is a separate purchase. But generally, in order for you to actually have a website of some sort, you're going to need some sort of hosting. So let's just type in website hosting, for example. So there are loads of different providers for website hosting, and it can be a little bit confusing. There's a lot of adverts that are going to be trying to sell you hosting, and there's always deals, there's always discounts, so it's definitely worth looking around. But my goal here is just to help you understand the difference between website hosting and domain names, just to begin with, because like I said at the start, that's normally a little bit of a confusion, and whether you need both, whether you can buy both things at the same time. So let's just look at some of these. We're not going to click on nav. So the top option here, GoDaddy. Okay, so this is a large, probably one of the largest providers of hosting and domain services. So let's just get down to this. So website hosting. So you have a website, or you want to build a website that consists of files and folders and images and videos, for example. So you need to basically have a place online where you can store those files, your website, and then they can be accessible to everyone around the world. So in a nutshell, that is website hosting. Website hosting is typically a service where you place those files on that server that you kind of purchase, or that space that you purchase, and they will then be served to everyone around the world. So that's, in essence, just website hosting. And like I said, you're going to find lots of different providers for website hosting, and there's lots of different prices, and it can get a little bit confusing. Maybe I'll do a separate tutorial specifically on hosting. But generally, website hosting is separate from buying a domain name. Now, what you might find if you're new to hosting and you do need hosting is that website hosting can sometimes be tied into buying a domain. So typically the price might include website hosting for 1 year, 12 months, and it also might include a free domain. So in this example here, GoDaddy, you can see that you can buy hosting for £4 a month, £4 a month, and it includes a free domain. So in actual fact, if you wanted to start building a website and you needed hosting to store your files and to serve them across the world, and you needed a domain name, you could purchase that right here at the same time. So that's really handy. Now, not every service is going to provide that, but potentially you could save yourself a little bit of money by doing that. Now you can see that it says here £11.99 a year value. So that's a typical price of a domain name, around about £11 for, say, a .com domain name. So there's one thing to note here is that there is a yearly subscription here. So basically you're going to buy a domain name for a certain amount of time. So after a year, you're going to need to pay some more money. So that it says here you're going to need to pay another £11.99. Well, the reality here is that you're going to pay £11 or whatever it is in dollars or whatever currency you're using, but that's probably not including some sort of tax. So typically it might be more than that. Okay, so that's just GoDaddy. Like I said, there's loads of others. There's probably a top option here. You get 10 best website hosting sites. So you can take these with a pinch of salt, right? So when there's lots of people trying to build these type of websites, and essentially this is just advertising. And essentially what this website has potentially is that they're trying to sell you these products. And although this looks like they're not making any money, by clicking on this and actually purchasing that service, it's likely that they're going to generate finance through that. So it could be, I'm only suggesting that it could be that this company here is actually providing a lot of money for that, for them to be associated to this company, so that when you click on it, they make money, or they're making a lot more money than, say, this one here. So it isn't necessarily just because it says it's the best here, it is the best. So it's worth looking around, getting different opinions, maybe going on to other social media and getting other people's opinion that actually use the service, as well as utilizing these type of websites to pick your hosting provider. But to be honest with you, you can't go too wrong. These companies here are well known. In this list here, we saw GoDaddy. So you can't typically go wrong. You will always find a lot of negative and a lot of positive opinions on pretty much all of these web service providers. Okay, so I've been chatting a lot about hosting, and I'm meant to be talking about domain names. So I wanted to make that distinction. So a hosting service is both, or can be both. Hosting service, you can purchase a domain at that point you purchase hosting. And hosting, remember, is essentially a package where you're going to store your website files so that they can then be distributed across the world. So it is possible for you to actually purchase a domain individually. So you don't have to purchase hosting and domains together. You could decide to purchase a domain individually, and there's lots of companies that will provide you that service. So if you were to just type in domain name into Google here, you'll probably find GoDaddy here probably offering this service. You can buy it from GoDaddy, 123reg, or other companies here. So this is probably these adverts here are targeted towards me, and I'm in the UK, so there's lots of UK companies here. Yours will probably be different. But like I said, so you can buy a domain name individually. So for example here, names. So let's just go for names.com. So this is one service, like many, where you can buy individual domains. So the idea here is you type in the domain and the prefix that you want to have and press search. And then that will give you an indication whether the domain is available, and then you can purchase it. Now, you're probably already aware there are different types of domains: .com, .net, .org, .info, and there's probably hundreds more now of different domain types that you can purchase. So it's out of the scope of this tutorial which one you're going to purchase. .com, if you can, in my opinion, only. If you can get the .com, that's all good. If you can't get .com, maybe you use some sort of apostrophe, some sort of dash here to try and get closer to the domain that you want to utilize. Now, you could start moving into search engine optimization, so optimizing to make it easier for customers to find you. So it can be good to use words that are associated to the website that you want to create. But again, that's probably a completely different tutorial. Pick your domain. Maybe you already know what domain you want. And then with a service like this, name.com, you can go ahead and you can just purchase an individual domain. So why would you do that? You saw previously that the hosting company that we just looked at, they're offering free domains and hosting altogether. So some people, maybe you've got multiple domains, it can be easier to actually manage your domain from one central location. Plus, also, if you wanted to change your hosting provider, you're kind of stuck managing that domain at that hosting company still. And you may then buy some more domains. So it may be more logical if you're thinking about creating multiple domains or having multiple domains, of managing them in one separate place. And that could be this company or other companies that provide this type of service. So the question you might have is, well, you can't find the domain that you're looking for. Someone else already owns it. Well, you can have a look to see who else owns something. You can perform a lookup on a domain. So we can do a domain lookup, for example, or domain checker. So that's going to check, and you can maybe determine who owns that particular domain, and then maybe you can contact them. Maybe you want to purchase from them. Alternatively, there are other services, for example, pool.com. And here what you can do is you can have a look to see what domains that you can purchase that people are trying to sell. But in addition to that, just to kind of summarize, when you buy a domain name, you buy that domain name for a certain amount of time. So depending on the amount of time you want to buy it for, depends on how much it costs. So obviously the longer you want to retain it, the more it's going to cost. So if I just add this to the basket, this domain here, this would probably give me an option of it's probably going to give me an option at some point. God, lots of options there. It's going to give me an option here of duration. You can see the amount of time affects the cost of the domain. So when the domain expires, what happens is that eventually over time, it goes back into a pool and it then becomes available. So what you can do with pool.com is you can have a look at domains that you can purchase, but as well as looking at domains that are just about to be deleted. So if there was a particular domain that you're looking for, this service allows you to back order. So you can kind of watch out for a domain that's going to get deleted and then purchase it when it becomes available. And you can see it's got some cool tools here, keyword alerts, if you're looking for particular domains. Okay, so that might be way too kind of out of the scope of what you're looking for. Maybe you're just looking to buy a domain, in which case this type of service here provided by name.com, and I'm not associated to any of these companies. I'm not making any money here. This is just one example of many. This company is just providing you a service whereby you can purchase the domain. And let's now start talking a little bit about some of the different options that are available, which you maybe want to try and avoid. Because we saw there straight away, as soon as I went into trying to purchase this domain, there's 100 different options. And that can be really kind of confusing for those who are new to purchasing domains. So let's take a look at this. So I've clicked on buy, and you can see that they're trying to sell me here Google Workspace. So that's irrelevant. We don't need anything like that to retain our domain. So this looks like it's offering, it says free advanced security, email address. So this type of service is like a kind of a business startup service, looks like potentially. It looks like you can purchase your domain for 78 pence if you pay £2.45 a month with this kind of business startup. So that might be something you're looking for to tie in a domain directly, but it can be easier to manage your domain if it's just in one central location like this. Right, so here we've got some options here. We've got this Titan email, and we've got SSL website security. So these are type of things that you can add on later. Right, so if you are starting a new business or website, you may want some sort of email service. Now, generally, every single hosting provider that you purchase will come with some sort of email service. So there's probably absolutely no need for you to purchase an email service unless you're not going to actually have a hosting package, in which case you may want email. So this might be a service that you're looking for, but maybe you would prefer to utilize Google, and there's Microsoft packages that can sometimes tie in better with your business services. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to buy these because they're they tend to be add-ons that you can just add on later. So let's start basic and then work with what you need rather than buying everything to begin with, where you're not too sure whether you need it or not. So when you're buying a domain, really just focus on buying the domain. Don't worry about all these other services, in my opinion. Right, so we don't need any of that. We don't need any of that. So we can just continue to the checkout. Okay, so you can see that generally when buying a domain, you can specify the duration you want to have the domain, and that then corresponds to the price you need to pay. Right, so in addition here, we've got some advanced security privacy options. And now this is very similar to any hosting, so any domain that you buy, whether you buy it with hosting or whether you buy it individually like this. So what happens here in general terms is when you buy a domain, you need to register that domain to yourself or to your business. That information will be available publicly because potentially if someone needs to get hold of you for maybe some sort of legal reasons, there's a contact for that domain. Now that might not be something that you want to have, in which case you can pay for these advanced security privacy options. And for £4, it's not going to be much more than that. Or it shouldn't be much more than that. And you can see what you're getting here. You're getting this who is privacy. So what's going to happen is your personal information, your business information is going to be hidden from public view, and then typically the domain name provider will then take that space. So if there is a legal issue or there is an issue, they would contact the domain first and they would contact you. Potentially it would work that way. So you're paying for that, and that's just something that I'd recommend potentially you would want to have. And you can see here it prevents spam calls and it does hide personal information if that's something you're interested in. Okay, so this is a different additional service that you can purchase, and I recommend when you buy a domain. So here it also offers you Domain Lock Plus. So what can happen, for example, if someone was able to actually log into one of these services, name.com, or whether you're using a hosting package, potentially they could make changes to your domain. They maybe delete your domain or set your domain for deletion. They may transfer the domain from your name to their name. So they might steal your domain, and potentially they might do that by logging in or breaking into one of these type of services and changing the details. So Domain Lock Plus is basically like an extra secure layer which is set up so that people can't just log in or just hack a site like this and then potentially change some details and then steal your domain. So this is a type of service that has multiple security steps which is going to prevent that. So it's highly recommended that maybe you look for something like that, and it's going to normally be part of a package which shouldn't cost more than say £4 or £5. So remember that's going to be for 1 year. Okay, so the terminology here, Domain Lock Plus and who is privacy, that's very similar to any product or any service that you're looking to buy a domain for. So look out for those. Okay, so the third one here is an SSL certificate. So the reality of today's websites is that you should be generally serving your page using HTTPS, kind of the secure version of you can see it up here, the secure version of accessing a website. And that's going to protect data from being seen, maybe from people who are trying to snoop the data in between your connection and your server. Okay, so SSL certificate, don't worry about it. Typically, if you're going to buy hosting, it would come with it. You can set this up for free anyway. This is probably just bundled into this to make the price a little bit more attractive. Okay, and that's it really. At this point, you're ready to go. Press next, pay for it, and you're good to go. So once you've paid for it, typically you've got some sort of facility so you can have the payment on automatically pay every year. So you can set it up to automatically do that. So you don't need to worry about it expiring at all. Typically the steps you take after you purchase it, you'll need to set up the Domain Lock Plus. and there'll be an option within the service for you to do that. Typically, that requires you to remember and retain information. That's important. So when you do set up Domain Lock Plus, you will be probably having to save a piece of information that you're going to need to then unlock it if you want to, for example, transfer this domain over to other services. But the key is, at the moment, let's not muddy the water there. Let's just say that just don't forget that when you purchase this, that this is maybe a separate step that you need to take. So the who is privacy, there's not much you need to do there. You'll probably receive an email to confirm that you're the owner, and then that's locked in for the year or 2 year or however the duration is. But this might be an extra step that you need to take. So log in, have a look, and set that up. So a quick recap, we've identified that we can buy domain names when we purchase hosting for our website, or else we can buy domain names individually. The benefit of buying the domain name individually is that we can store all of our domains, if we have multiple names, in one place, and we don't need to worry about, if we don't continue with the hosting at a service, we don't need to worry about there being kind of fragmented domains, because we might buy a domain at one hosting, then another hosting, and so on. So having it all in one place can be beneficial. How and where to buy a domain name? Well, really at the cheapest place possible. That's the best place to buy a domain name. So I mentioned name.com as one website to buy domains. Now you can buy domain names at many of the different hosting providers, and we saw a list of maybe 6 or 7 hosting providers, and you can't go too wrong with that list. Let's just take a look at that list again, hosting providers. You can't go too wrong really with that list. Bluehost, HostPapa. I think GoDaddy are the biggest provider, and then you'll find maybe Bluehost is maybe the second biggest if you're thinking about the biggest company. But like I said, you're going to find reviews, a lot of negative reviews and positive reviews about all of these services. And ultimately, maybe just to begin with, is about price. Just get the cheapest price. Okay, so we spoke a little bit about the costs and hidden costs and extra costs. So let's remember that a domain name generally will cost between anything from free, if you buy some hosting, you'll get it for free, anywhere between free and maybe about £20 for a .com domain. Now, if you start to look at other domains, .org and the other newer domain names that are available, you might be paying anywhere between like 30, 50, 70 pounds. So it depends on what you want to purchase, of course, will depend on the cost of the domain. Now, we saw some of the hidden costs there, and we do recommend that advanced security and the privacy option. So those are 2 options that I'm recommending, but avoid any of the other extra things that I haven't mentioned here. So all those are add-ons that we can add on later, and even the domain privacy is something that you can add on later. So if you're not too sure, just deselect it from the options and just buy the domain name, because like I said, these are all add-ons that you can add on later. Okay, so that's really the basics of it. So I was going to talk a little bit about domain transfers and this idea of domain transfers, and also DNS and what that is and what it means for your domain name. So a little bit about domain transfers. Well, let's just go back to this service here, for example. So this service, you buy your domain, it's stored and managed in their service, and you can log in and you can see it, you can update it, you can change and purchase more, the duration more, and other services and so on. But one thing you can do is you can transfer your domain, right? So for example, if you don't want to use this company anymore, at any point in time, you can transfer it to another company, and they basically store their name there in their registry, in their service. So that's not a problem at all. Sometimes you would pay for that transfer, but in order to transfer your domain, you'll need some special codes to transfer it across. And that's essentially what this is doing. This Domain Lock Plus is actually preventing anyone from just logging in, getting those keys, so they can transfer your domain over to somewhere else where it can be held there. So in terms of transfer, it's really simple. You'll normally be guided. If you purchase from name.com or anywhere else, you'll be guided on how you can make that transfer. But a transfer, like I said, generally consists of some sort of key. You pass that key over to the person or the company that you then want to host your domain at, and then they use that to actually transfer it across to their services, and you can manage it from there. So you don't need to worry about if you've purchased a domain somewhere and you're not too sure what to do, or it's not where you need it to be. Just pay for it to be transferred, not a problem. So with that in mind, you saw that earlier we found a hosting provider that offered a domain names for free. So potentially you maybe would in the first year go for that type of package, and then you could transfer that domain from that hosting company over to a service like name.com. So some other considerations, right? So if you were to purchase a domain name with a hosting package, typically what happens is your domain name is automatically set up for your hosting. So all you need to do is upload your files to the hosting server, and then your website magically works. Well, that isn't always going to be the case if you were to purchase a domain name from, for example, name.com. So how this is generally going to work is that, so let me just give you an overview of how a domain name works in general, how a domain name allows you to actually access a website. So we've got a browser here, we type in your domain name. So what's going to happen is that your computer, your browser is going to send a signal to a DNS server. Okay, so a DNS server is basically a service online, and it's not something you pay for. And inside of this service, what you'll find is your domain name is stored there. So all domain names in the world that are accessible online will be kind of stored in this type of service. So generally, your domain name, say asd.com, is stored there, and then it's then recorded against an IP address. Let's just call that IP address that. Okay, so this IP address is the actual, if you think about a telephone number, okay, so if you want to call someone, you need a telephone number. Now, if someone else had that telephone number, you'd be calling multiple people. So it makes sense that every telephone number is completely unique. So you'll be provided an IP address where your actual website resides on the server, on your hosting. And that IP address needs to be attached in a DNS server to your domain name. So what happens when you type in your domain in your browser, a signal will be sent to the DNS server. It grabs the IP address for you, and then it sends it back to you. So now your browser has the IP address of where your website is actually being hosted. So it can now send a signal over to your hosting company where you're hosting your website. So one of the things you'll need to do if you do buy domain hosting, if you do buy a domain name, is you'll need to change the settings so that it points to your hosting. So this is kind of out of the scope of this tutorial, but that's the basics of what kind of things that you'll need to do next once you purchase your domain. Now, how to do that? Well, that can be fairly simple depending upon your hosting. So most hosting providers, if you don't buy a domain with hosting, they will give you instructions. So if you go into their control panel, their administrative panel, admin panel, log in, and there should be an option somewhere which will give you information about how to set up your DNS settings. So what you'll need to do is need to copy those settings, log into, if you're using, for example, name.com, and just update the settings so it corresponds to what the hosting is provide you. So that way you've then got the correct information. It won't just be an IP address, there will be some other details as well. And that will then allow everyone else in the world, when they type in your domain name, it will then, their browser will then connect to a DNS server, get that information, and then they'll be able to access your website. So those would be some additional steps you need to think about after you purchase a domain if you do have separate hosting. So I do hope there's some value there for you. That's a quick overview, if you like, on purchasing domain names. If you do have any queries or any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. Now, typically, if you still are a little bit stuck, generally most of the good hosting providers, they will provide a lot of information to help you get started. So don't worry. Don't make the decision, oh, I want to purchase a domain and hosting in the same place because I'm not too sure what to do. It isn't a massive thing to do this. And you will find that most hosting providers will have good support and will help you through this process because they want you to use their service, of course. So there's normally lots of information, and this isn't something that's not been done many times. Hundreds of people, probably a day, are doing this. So there's always information on Reddit or other pages online, which is going to help you through the process. Thank you for listening. Hopefully that was useful for you, like I said, and I hope to see you in another tutorial. Thank you very much.